O'clock. Let's uh let's get let's get started. We've got our guest speaker tonight is Gail Rust, and she's going to talk to us about storytelling. And she's going to tell us about how we find a story to tell, and then where to go with that. So how to develop it and how to share your journey. So a good story involves descriptive words and actions. It'll have a clever beginning, a memorable middle, and an enjoyable end. And a good story probably has some conflict in the middle too. So by the time we're done tonight, Gail says we're going to have at least half a dozen stories to tell. And if you don't know Gail, she's an accomplished speaker. She's almost always in the speech contests. I enjoy listening to her deliver speeches in the contest. She's been a member for almost 14 years now, currently in Speak TV. So with that, let's hear what Gail has to say. It's all yours, Gail.
Okay. Well, I do enjoy a good story, and people tell me that I tell a good story as well. So I've got a little project for each of us. I want you to take a 8x10 paper and fold it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spaces, so that when it's together, it looks like this. All right, can you do that right away? Take a sheet of paper and do the sections, because that's how we're going to discover different stories. And this was taught to me by Teresa, and I don't remember her last name, but I work with it with new members, and especially people who say they don't have any stories and they don't know what to talk about. We have so many stories, we don't even know how many stories we have. So if you fold your paper, you got it folded?
Yep.
All right. So in each box, I want you to decide on a topic. For me, I've got family, work, career in another box, friends, travel and leisure. And I want you to head each one of these boxes. Church, creative, relationships, home, car, and hobbies, volunteers. And that's just one side of the paper. You might think of more topics. You can use the other side. So how do we find stories? Well, if we use this formula, each one of these areas has a story. And within each box, you find out what's the event. Like under family, grandma. It's a person. Grandma died in our house, and there was a little white lie that it was involved in that. Now, it doesn't sound like much now, but if you put an action to that story and words of importance, you can come up with a story that's fun and easy to share. For work, I was a nurse, and there were a lot of characters that I worked with. And Some I met in a nursing home. Some in the clinic that I worked at, and each one has a story. Friends. Betty was in West Side Story with me, and there's a story behind that with floating falsies. So, and there's Travel and Leisure was the time that my husband and stepson left me in a gas station and took off. We were in North Carolina or somewhere, I don't know. And how that all came about. And one of the other things that you want to incorporate in these stories is exaggeration. Have a strong opening, like Keith says. Have a middle and a strong end. And 6 minutes is plenty of time. And I don't know if you know this, but if you write your story out online and you've got a word counter, 600 words is 6 minutes. 700 words is 7 minutes. You don't want to be that close. I like to do about 6.5. Relationships. My father had a wooden leg and my mother walked an invisible dog. That's a story you don't want to miss. I did do a one-woman show in 2011 and had an opportunity to share some of my stories. So for those that are joining, we're working on deciphering stories about people, places, things. I lived in a 100-year-old home and it had lots of secrets. So what I do is develop the story right there within that little box. You could even start. Does anybody want to give me one of their box stories or one of their titles?
I put down cats.
Cat. That's a good one. That's a good one. So your cat, I know, does lots of funny, fun things. You might want to mention his name or her name. And what makes you like your cat? What's an interesting story behind it? Did you find it somewhere? Did someone give it to you? Did you get it at the Humane Society? What color is it? What does it do for fun? How do you relate to the cat? How does other people relate to your cat? Does it like people? Not like people? Just exaggerate the storyline is really what you want to do. Exaggeration makes a story interesting and fun. That's great, Yuri. Thank you. Thank you. Keith, do you have a story or a box that you want to fill in?
Yeah, I would probably tell the story about how I met my wife.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. So
And
yeah, it's like we worked together. We did know each other. And one night after bowling, it was a corporate bowling league. I saw her and I wasn't trying to pick her up. I was just gonna have some, interesting conversation with one of my coworkers, and the bar was kind of dark, and I came up behind her and tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Hey, don't I know you?" just to be funny. And she thought somebody was trying to pick her up, and she just whipped around and said, "I don't know you." And So I
That
walked,
was your
so I wa-
beginning.
so I walked home and her friend said, why were you being so mean to him? And she goes, some guy trying to pick me up. And she said, no, that was Keith Comiskey from marketing. You know him. He's a nice guy. And she felt so bad. Then she came up to me the next day at work and apologized. And I think she felt sorry for me. So she married me.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Now you could describe your wife in the story. That's a great beginning. It's a hook that you can get people to listen to you. You can describe what you're wearing. What was the one thing that appealed to her or to you? And you can exaggerate it, bring in other people. How did they react to your relationship? Was it risky at work or not?
It was kept quiet.
Yeah,
It
see,
was
so
kept quiet. It was kept quiet until we announced our engagement.
isn't that interesting? Yeah. So there's a story there, Keith.
Yeah.
A good story. And what about your father or mother? Anybody? Susan, do you have a story?
I do, Gail. It's not about my father and mother. As I was filling in the blanks, something came to mind immediately when you said travel and leisure. And so I would tell a story called Lost in Luxembourg.
Oh, great,
We had
great
been
story.
traveling in Europe and we decided to go to Luxembourg as one of our destinations. We got into a roundabout with construction and couldn't figure out where we were or how to get off. So after going round and round and round, we pulled off finally into a park area. And I had no idea what was going on, but the gentleman who I was with, my former fiance, he said, okay, that's enough. And he took a nap. And then by the time he had his second wind, we found our way back out.
Isn't that something? Some people just need to collapse.
Yeah.
That's a great story. And I want to know more about it. You know, what kind of a person was he? Where were you in your life when this happened? How did you become so vulnerable? And what kinds of things in Luxembourg were you off to see? Where you must have been driving. So how did you get the courage to drive in a foreign country?
Well, plus with the different side of the steering wheel.
Sure. You were on the right instead of the left. Correct? Yeah. So there's a story there and a good one. And all you need to do is develop it. And that takes me to the next part. How do I work with a story? Well, I'll first figure out what the event is, and then the action, what happened. And then I will exaggerate it as much as I possibly can. And once I exaggerate, then I can start to develop the story. And I write it out longhand because I want to get a feel for it, and I can scratch and do all sorts of stuff to manipulate the story. And once I've figured out in longhand how the story goes, I will then go to the computer and I'll put it up on the computer and make some more revisions, cut out pieces that I don't think work quite as well as others, or put something in that exaggerates the story so much better. Make corrections and then revisions, and then start to memorize. But don't forget, I'm already familiar with the story from the time I started to write it. So the memory seems to develop as the story develops. And then just work with the whole process of practicing it out loud. I do that about a week or 2 weeks before the competition. And I will work the cadence, the language, the opening, the closing, the gestures, the exuberance, all of that has to be worked out. This is an original story, so I wanted to have an impact. And I do this several times, sometimes several times during the day. And then the day before, I don't practice. I simply go over it in my brain. Sometimes when I'm swimming, I'm doing my speech because it's repetition and it's right there. So, and then just make sure that you have it memorized, because you don't want to lose your place when you're out there giving your speech. You want to be able to remember every detail. And win or fail, you are a winner because you've learned something and you've told and shared your stories. I carry this sheet with me a lot, and I want you guys to do the same, because you'll come up with a topic that fits one of these categories or doesn't, and you want to make sure that you get it penned out. And who else has something they want to share? Laura, do you have a story? Laura,
You're on mute.
you're mute. You're mute.
I see Tom's got his hand up too. Maybe he's got something.
Oh, okay. I don't have time on my pictures here.
Yeah. While Laura's working on her.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm fine, nice to see you.
You too. You too. I know
love-
you've got lots of stories,
I
Tom.
love to tell stories, and I have one about how I found family in Sweden from a postcard. My grandfather had been missing for over 100 years, and I found my grandfather's burial place in Phoenix, Arizona.
My goodness.
I've had a lot of fun.
What are you sure? Come on, help me want to clean up the so.
Thanks, Tom, for that. What a great story that would make. Oh my goodness, I want to hear that one. And Laura, now, hello. You have a
Sorry.
story?
Well, I was thinking about Yuli and his story about the cat, and I have a wonderful, wonderful story about a cat. But come to think of it, I could tell a story about my last 2 days trying to repair the leak in my toilet. And let me tell you, it was like almost an odyssey. I think I work slowly anyway, and working on the toilet and Googling different solutions and trying to figure out what the problem was, putting it together after I got all the parts. And then after I took it apart, I mean, I had to hacksaw things to get it apart. But taking it apart, put it together, and it still leaked, but in a different place.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah, but I'm sorry I tuned in a little bit late. I missed a little bit there.
Well,
But,
what we talked about in the beginning was to get a sheet of paper and fold it into, so you have nine squares. And in each square, you're going to have a topic. For you, it would be toilet, you know. Now there's a story. You got to use humor though. Humor is so essential in a story. Somewhere there's time to laugh. I mean, you just have to laugh after a while when it leaks in a different place, for heaven's sakes. You know, So if you just had each one of these categories with a title, it will provoke you to think of a story. And that's what I really want you to do, is to carry this around and fill it out and fill it in with a story. And then tell it just like a story, like you're reading a book to a child. It's a story about you, about something that's happened to you, and about the people involved. It's a great tool. I think when I first started doing this, I really had a good time with it. In 2011, I wrote, produced, and acted in a one-woman show. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it, because I didn't know beans from donuts what to write about. And then Alan Edge was my director, and he said, just start with the people in your life. So from my father, mother, my brothers, my cousins, and then go to events. And, you know, as I developed each person, a story emerged. And it was really even surprising to me that I could do 80 minutes, or I think it was 60 minutes of 1 hour performance, and have enough material for an hour-long one-woman show. I think that was my greatest accomplishment in 2011. I did that. So do we have any questions, or anybody want to share another story? Jason, you haven't spoken yet. Tell me about your story.
Yeah, Gail, two things came to my mind, and both are travel related, because that's where I've often found some speeches before. One is I've been in 3 bus accidents while traveling.
Oh my goodness.
One very severe, but 2 very minor, and I always thought it was kind of funny that it happened to me 3 times.
I guess.
The other is when I was in college, I actually studied abroad in Russia and visited Lenin's tomb, and always wanted to write a speech about that, on the experience of seeing Lenin in the glass coffin.
You could see him?
Yeah, he's in a glass coffin.
Oh my goodness.
It's a very unique experience, and I've always wanted to articulate that. I think the thing, Gail, I struggle with in storytelling is the idea of exaggeration. I consider myself too honest to exaggerate sometimes. So I struggle with that. I have some good stories, but getting them kind of to be that next level is, I think, a place I struggle.
Sometimes if we think of exaggeration as merely broadening a subject, being, let's see, exaggerating is a way to emphasize. So think about emphasizing or exaggerating. Can you imagine a tomb that you could look through? Use your pauses, do your hands. I was in Russia, nobody arrested me.
Thankfully,
Yeah. I mean, that's an exaggeration in some ways. And step outside of the truth just a little bit. Not the truth so much as how you could stretch it. The truth is you don't want to lie, of course, but you could certainly take yourself out of the story and look at it and think, God, that's really weird. And I can understand that you don't want to, because you're a fairly honest guy, but there's other ways to bring in some humor, even on your, can you imagine some people have an accident once, no, twice, 3 times? That's me on a bus in a foreign country. And raise your own voice. Sometimes you can talk like this and it's really an interesting story, but when you raise your voice and be animated, it's fun to watch. Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you. Great.
Good. Anyone else? Daryl, we haven't heard from you yet.
I don't know if I can get that response, Gail, so thank you. What I enjoy is stories, hearing somebody tell a story, and then it just brings more stories to mind of things that I've went through, thinking of Laura with the toilet experience and things that I went through trying to do before I called the plumber, the travel experience where I was in Boston with a couple of friends and we're standing there watching the bags go round and round, and I was kind of an inexperienced traveler and I didn't know what we were waiting for. And they finally said, well, Daryl, where's your luggage? And I didn't have any. I just had to carry on. But I guess that's what I just love about stories is the things that come to mind after you hear one. I haven't seen Lennon's Tomb yet, so thankfully I don't have anything to jump off of there.
Yeah. But even the idea of having no luggage, you carry on, is a story in itself. What made you decide to carry it on? And did everybody else not get the memo or what?
Yeah.
And the people you traveled with are part of the story as well. Where you went, what you did, was it business or was it pleasure? All of those things you can bring into the story. Just expand your mind, be creative. That's what storytelling is all about. I had to have a story. I would have lost a lot of people in the audience, but my life is just a bundle of stories, I guess. And just encourage you to develop them and have fun with them.
Looks like Yuri's got his hand up.
Okay, let's see, Yuri.
You mentioned exaggeration as something to keep in mind while building out the story. For example, with my cat, what to me there seems to be a necessary balance between using more of facts and truth, and also some exaggeration that might cross into less than believable aspect. What kind of balance is there, and is there something that is more a better fit for exaggeration compared to something that is a better fit for more a factual and a more a truth thing, to maybe respect the people that if they listen to the story, they would rather see more, hear more actuality about it than just a bunch of make-believe stuff.
Right. So you're saying, is there a balance between how much you can exaggerate and how much you can tell the truth? You want it to basically be true, right?
Right. Like, for example, I can describe my cat. I mention her name, her actual name, and then how I relate to her. But then interesting story, I can definitely think of some, but I also want to share. No, she's a cat. While she's not a person or a human being, I also want to like treat my Gail respect, that if she, that to respect her by sharing something that actually happened, maybe insert a little bit of exaggeration, but mostly try to be respectful to her and be honest about it. And that balance, is there a better part of the story that's a more of a better fit for exaggeration compared to some other part that is a better fit for more a truth, more factual part of it?
All right, I understand. I don't know about you, Yuri, but I talk to my cat. Do you talk to your cat?
Yes, I did talk to my cat.
Yeah.
I say did because she's long gone.
Because he is who he is. Had you ever thought of being your cat? Bring that conversation into a story. You know, good morning, says the cat. And you say, good morning, kitty. Or he got you out of bed with his poking or his meowing or his noise. And how does that sound? Meow. He's got different sounds. He has different personalities. You know, sometimes my cat will finish a lunch and cry for more. And it's a special cry. Meow. You know, you could do that. Bring your cat to life. Talk about, and that's not, that's what I mean by exaggeration. Not creating a whole new persona, but the things that he does can be exaggerated. And I know he knows that I know that he wants to go outside. And that's another special cry. Meow. Develop those stories or that conversation that you have with your cat. Because I know they're there. How did he get his name? Why did you name him what you named him? Does that help at all, Yuri?
It helps, and perhaps Gail, towards the end, if we have about say 10 minutes left, maybe you could share a snippet from that 60-minute one woman show, just to kind of maybe put it all together. I think all of us here would enjoy listening to that, and maybe it'll bring back some good memories if you're up for it.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Keith, what do you think?
Well,
we need some time for questions.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've got questions. This is questions, answers, commentary. You know, it's at this point we're it's pretty much free form as long as we stay on the topic of storytelling. All right, Susan's got her hand up, something to say or ask.
Susan always has some kind of commentary. I
That's
have
good.
become an advocate for Udly. This is a tool that was just introduced not too long ago by Toastmasters International, and I've used it a couple of times. What it does is records you. So you write down your speech, and you're talking about keeping it 6 minutes or 600 words. It's going to track that for you. You write your speech, you read your speech, do it as dramatically or before or after you practice, and it will come back with feedback. How long were you talking? What are some crutch words that you used? Repetitive things that maybe you don't want to repeat over and over, different words for it. What was some opportunity for a descriptive word and something that was confusing? It will tell you all of that. It's great feedback. It's like having your personal Toastmaster evaluator every time you go through it. So that's something that is available to all of the Toastmasters through Toastmasters International. It's called Udly. Very easy use, no cost to us.
Can you give us the Udly?
Yeah, YOODLI. Udly.
.com or you just go
I just get it at Toastmasters. So
Okay.
I take it right off the website, but I'm sure there is a .com. I'm sure they have a purchase version as well.
Well, that's a great tool.
I just
love
dropped
it.
the link at Toastmasters in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jason.
I have an opinion too on the whole truth versus exaggeration
Uh-huh.
thread that we had going on. So the way I tend to compartmentalize my life, and when I'm at work, or if I am clearly conveying information or facts to somebody, then there's no question. It has to be 100% accurate, 100% truthful, because it's my personal, reputation, it's my honor at stake, and I won't knowingly lie or deceive or stretch the truth. However, that's not what a Toastmaster speech is. Unless you're practicing, hey, I'm doing a presentation that I have to deliver to the board of directors or to my boss or to my team or something like. If you're practicing that, yeah, practice that and stay within those guardrails. If you're doing a speech in your Toastmaster club on some story, who says it has to be true? And if you have any personal qualms about it, after the speech is over, you can just say, hey, by the way, that was a story that was exaggerated. All right. And I've actually found that kind of liberating, right? I can tell a story that's 90% true and just have fun with the other 10% and leave people wondering. I've done it so many times, and at the end somebody will say, did that actually happen? Well, mostly.
Yeah.
It was a
That's
speech.
great. That's great,
It
Keith.
was just a speech, right?
And it's just a story.
It's just a story.
Nobody
Right, and-
says it has to be a true story.
Yeah, and it's developing many of the skills that we try to use, right?
Mhm.
Vocal variety and inflection and suspense, and I mean these are all things we try to incorporate into our speeches anyway. So have some fun with it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's the way I look at it.
Laura, you have a question?
Yeah, getting back to the Udly thing.
Uh-huh.
We talked about it a little bit at our meeting last Thursday, not familiar with it yet. And the question came up that what happens to the content? Does Toastmasters then own the content of this artificial intelligence evaluation or whatever? So I don't know. It's just something I figured I'd put out there. One of the members was, I don't know, wondering about that.
Do you know anything more about it, Susan? No.
No, I don't. I guess anytime you're using something that could possibly go public, you have to watch what your topic is. So if I'm giving a speech at Toastmasters, I would probably give that at my church. It's not, well, except for DJAB. You have to know who your audience is. And if you don't mind it, being heard, there's no reason not to use Udly. I don't know that they would record everything that every Toastmaster put out there, because that would be an awful lot of data. Jason, do you know?
Like anything, it's important to, when you sign up or sign in, to look at the privacy policy. The Udly privacy policy, looking at it, has basically 3 pretty simple bullet points, and it basically says that privacy is at the core of what they're doing, and primarily only you can see your content unless you purposefully share it with someone.
Oh, well, that's good.
But like anything, like Zoom has a privacy policy that they can monitor what we're doing also. That's why we read the disclaimer that we do at all contests, for example. So because of what Zoom's policies are. So it's important, I would say, anytime you leverage technology, while no one really ever does, look at some of those policies and guidelines that those companies have about how they use your information and data.
Todd, you
Thank
have
you.
a question or comment?
Todd,
I was going to say that I know personally 3 of the world champions or the runner-up to the world champions that are using Udemy. And if there was some sort of problem about their proprietary material being kept or stored, I'm sure they would not be using that technology in order to safeguard what they believe is their proprietary rights.
thank you.
Good to know.
That is really a wonderful tool. I've never heard of it before. I'm going to have to look that up and see if it, you know, I can't imagine it not being helpful.
I have a question. You in the introduction that I gave you, that's sitting out on the Toastmaster website now, or the District 35 website. You talked about the opening, like a catchy opening, the body, and then the ending. So you spent a lot of time talking about the body, and I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on how to make a story really snap with an ending.
With an ending or a beginning?
Ending. Is surprise essential? Is it just wrapping up the story? Like how, you know, what suggestions or experience do you
Well,
have?
I guess it would depend on the story. But essentially, I think it has to pull things together. Pull it together with a punch. And I don't know particular punches that one would use, but definitely pull the story into a personal note you could do, or a personal note for the audience, or how it impacted you. You can have a funny ending, or a sad, I guess, if that's where you're going with it. But pull it together, end it, and I don't know how else to explain it, I guess. Certainly when you're opening your story, you want to have a hook of sorts, like I'm nuts about golf, and or what about you? And in the end, you could bring the beginning to the end. So I'm nuts about golf, but I'm never going to use the bathroom on the course again. And, you know, I think that kind of works as well. Yuri, you have a question?
Yes, Gail, towards the topic of the ending, what ending? I'm going to circle back again to the 60-minute presentation you've done yourself. What was the ending you used? That clearly you worked in a lot and you produced and all that. What was the ending you used, if you remember it? Just an additional example, kind of what you have experimented with.
Well, my ending was a little philosophical, I guess. I don't know if I can remember all of what I said, but it was potential never used is like having none at all. Are you tapped into your potential? How has your life changed? Mine will never be the same because of this play. So listen to your inner voice.
Sounds
And
good.
something will come of it. I don't know. I don't remember what I said. Isn't that something? Todd, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, since this is a group of coaches or those who are hoping to coach clubs, how would we use this storytelling technique to best express the experience or to capture the guest and convert the guest to a member?
Hmm. Well, I think using the technique of the different boxes, sometimes a new member said, "Ah, I don't have any stories. I don't know what to talk about, what to write about." If you sit down with them if they're not solidified yet as a new member, sit down with them and go over the different categories of stories that can be found in relationships or family or travel or leisure. Sometimes that's the main thing that keeps a member from joining, is they don't know what to write about. And if you can give them suggestions, it makes it much easier for them to zero in on things. I know I've worked with new members myself, and they seem to appreciate the fact that I've given them ideas, and then to let them know that an icebreaker is just a story. Susan.
I would add to that, for most of us on this call here are fairly experienced Toastmasters, and using this technique. Oh, there goes my screen again. Using this technique and always having a topic handy can benefit the meeting, the club, the meeting experience, in that you get into situations, we've probably always all been there at one point, where you get to the meeting and you had two speakers and they both couldn't make it, or they dropped out for one reason or another, and you're sitting there thinking, how are we going to have a meeting today? But if you had this list handy, you just get up there. Okay, maybe it's not completely worked through, maybe it's not polished, but you have a 5 to 7 minute speech there.
Sure.
Susan?
Yes, something came to my mind when I was listening to Todd's question, and I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. He was referring to a story. And so I have a story that I tell new guests who come in who aren't quite sure about joining. And it's a real life story. It might have a little exaggeration in there as far as the dates, but I tell them, and some of you may have heard this already, is that back in, I believe it was 2001, we had a guest just like yourself come to our meeting. And we saw him occasionally over the months, but he just never really showed up again. But don't worry about that, because we stayed in touch. We let him know when our meetings were coming. We kept re-inviting him. And a year and a half later, out of nowhere, he showed up with his application and his fee. So that's how I took a new member story, which is true. And I've shared that with a couple of people who are a little skeptical about, oh, I don't know if I want to join. I don't pressure them. I say, you've got time to decide. In fact, go check some other clubs, make sure that it's a good fit for you. But we have one member who took a while and he loves it. So that's just a way to weave your own story to tell a new member or somebody who's thinking about it.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks, Susan. Daryl, you have a question?
I was just wondering, Gail, is there a reason that you do 9 squares? Is there a magic number there? I'm just thinking that with a smaller group, maybe 4 squares, or is that 9 a big deal?
Well, it gives you a choice, a little better choice. And really, the 9, if you do some brainstorming, you can come up with something for each square, I think. It's just that that's the way I was taught, and I thought that it would be a good thing to share with all of you. You know, you can do as many as you want. You know, if you've got 4 good stories, do 4. If you've got 2,
I
then
just,
do 2.
I love that blank sheet. I think that's such a powerful thing. A blank sheet with all kinds of stories just waiting to be told.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you nailed it. Thank you.
Thank you. So it wasn't a waste of time, Keith. I did something good.
Yeah. No. Jennifer's got something.
Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer.
Yeah. Hello, Gail. This is absolutely very amazing. Really amazing. I know to become an interesting person, you have to be a storyteller. I think that is why last year the theme for the international convention was we are storytellers. Toastmasters, we are storytellers. This week I was mentoring 2 of my newest enrollments for my club, one of my clubs, Southwest Toastmasters. When you're talking about the icebreaker, I went through the Pathways program, and you're talking about the icebreaker speech. And there's always the question of what do you talk about? And so I had them tell me, okay, what are you going to talk about in your speech? And so one of the guys from Nigeria was like, oh, I was born in X, I went to Y, it was very factual, 3 words per statement. And then I said, let's make this story very interesting, So I asked him, what tribe? I didn't even know about your lecture, Gail. What tribe are you from? So he said he's Yoruba, and I know a bit about the Nigerian and all the cultures. So I said, you can talk about, where you are from. You can talk about Nigeria being one of the richest in terms of oil reserves, talk about the cultures and the tribal wars, just give people something interesting that they will remember you by for your presentation. And so what was interesting is that as we speak to new members about how they can give their speeches through storytelling, they get ideas about how to give the speech, and they can begin to see the relevance of Toastmasters in the day-to-day. So I really appreciate your presentation so very much. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thanks, Jennifer. Laura, you have a question? Or comment?
Yes, I wound up in a situation, our last meeting, where the speaker didn't make it, and we only had 1 speaker scheduled, and I had table topics. So they said, okay, Laura, take over. It's your meeting. And what I did was I started out with a story about one of the members, as far as, his background of what I knew, and I asked him to continue it. And so he told the story about, he's a farmer, and told the story about his farming and stuff. But I said each person in turn will take that story over, and we'll go around the room, and we'll each tell our own story about that material, 1 minute to 2 minutes, And afterward, I made the comment as to how wonderful the gestures were, and the expressions, and everything they used to tell their little 1 to 2 minute story, because it was something about their relationship to, what the previous speaker had said and the topic, and it worked out a lot better than I thought, because I kind of freaked out when they said, Laura, you're gonna have to take over, but I just thought I'd share that.
Well, that's a great idea, Lauren. We used to do that at Love of Laughter. You start a story and then time up, and then you continue on. That's a great tool to develop a story. I love it. Good for you. That was a great idea that you had. Did I see Daryl? Did you have your hand up, or no? Okay. Anyway, is there any other questions?
And I can give my
wish-
2 cents about, so Gail, I can give my 2 cents about your comment about, the perception that's kind of exaggeration is telling a lie or being untruthful. I really don't think so. I think it's really putting life to what could be very mundane and boring information. even in the workplace, Keith, I think there is an opportunity because I think like for me as an instructor, when I'm giving my students feedback, I can tell them very factual things, you know, and they will not even hear what you're saying. But I need to relate to them because I was like, okay, let's talk about your nurses. You know, I mean, I'm in the College of Nursing, so they are nurses. So I need to be able to tell us, give an example from their world, and then relate them to biostatistics because they find that intimidating, so that they can begin to make that connection. So I think there is opportunity in every one of our fields to be able to tell stories. Just a quick one. That on Friday was a big day for me and one of my committees because we were able to put forth and pass a DEIJ task force. We turned that from a task force to a committee. That was a big prorated battle where I was able to test all my Toastmasters skills. But what was interesting about that and how we were able to do that, especially put in a clause about having a brave space, which the authorities were very intimidated by, was for us to be able to come and talk about the stories about people's experiences around injustice within the College of Nursing. Those stories is what was able to persuade a lot of people who could not even appreciate why there's a need of a brave space to be able to talk about this, and we're able to put that in. And I didn't have to because I took a stand. I didn't have to water down the protocols, the policies and procedures of this DIA task force, simply because we had the stories to be able to back the facts. So I really, really appreciate what you're talking about today. And I wish I had learned more, had your lecture before then I would have saved myself a lot of hassle, but we're still successful all the same. So thank you, Gail.
That's great, Jennifer. Well,
All right. Well,
I hope you all have great stories to tell now. You've got some subjects, you've got your sheet. You're going to carry this with you so you can write things down and come up with new ideas. Yay, Daryl. And Yuri, I'm sorry, I don't have my memory hat on tonight. I wish I could. There's a few characters I could do, but we've run out of time, I think, right?
maybe some other time you can come back and give us a encore performance.
Okay, at least a few of my characters.
Right.
All right. Yeah, Keith, one more thing I just remembered. The TI, the engaging humor, because that's what I'm working on right now. The story collection as part of that. So what I'm not sure about is whether it's available for everybody or just for folks who are doing the story collection pathways on engaging humor. So that's another resource. I think it's really fantastic. I tried to download it. I don't know whether it's downloadable or not. I don't know whether anybody else knows about that resource. Does anyone know about it?
I've completed the engaging humor. That was my most fun path. And I still use that storybook. So I know you can keep it after you finish your path, but I don't know of a way that you can share that with other people. I think that's kind of proprietary because I'll bet that was built just for Toastmasters. And it's one of the best tools they ever gave us as far as fitting in a resource for a path.
I agree. Yeah, and I agree. I think we can advocate for that to be available. I'm going to use my voice to advocate for that. I'm making some calls tomorrow and I can ask if they can make it available for every part. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Gail, for your time tonight. Very interesting topic. For those of you that are interested, our next session will be Sunday, April 2nd. Our speaker will be Dick Hawley. Although he hasn't given me a topic yet. We left that open-ended, but I've got 2 weeks to pin him down now as to what he's going to talk about. He's always got something interesting. So look forward to that and hope to see you all there on April 2nd.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Gail.
All right.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Right.